Mavuika is finally here, and there's a lot of peculiar stuff going on when it comes to her gameplay. So in this video, I'm going to showcase and rank best to worst Mavuika teams, although, spoiler alert, even the worst teams have their own surprises, but then I'll also properly compare the potential of her weapons, from free-to-play to this signature weapon that enables insane 1 million burst attacks, and of course, most important of all, I'll share my thoughts on her viability if you don't have Citlali or Xilonen, the two units that absolutely skyrocket Mavuika's damage potential. So if you have Mavuika and want to learn how to achieve best damage even with free-to-play alternatives, or if you're still not sure if she's worth pulling for, then keep watching this video. First things first, since I will be showcasing a lot of stuff in this video, keep in mind my Mavuika has both skill and burst raised to level 7, and that's because she requires weekly materials from the new boss, which I've only got 2 of. And with some rough estimates, she's gonna be dealing about 20% less damage compared to her max talents, but don't worry, she still hits like a truck. Now, I won't delve too deep into her kit because plenty of videos from other creators have already covered this since they were given early access, and in a nutshell, if you tap the skill button, she will deal pyro damage initially, and then every 2 seconds, or 6 times total, she will keep applying pyro damage, even when off-field. But if you hold down the skill or tap again after using it, she mounts the bike and you can do all sorts of wacky attacks. But the main one is going to be the charge attack, which performs these funny donuts with the bike. However, her main way to deal damage is going to be the burst. She will deliver this insanely powerful initial hit and then will actually mount the bike automatically, and for 7 seconds, she has unlimited Night Soul points and can just spam any attacks. But usually, it's most efficient to just do 8 charge attacks, or donuts as they called. But I'll also show a couple of tricks how you can improve the damage. By the way, since her burst does not require energy and instead relies on fighting spirit, which can be obtained by either anyone doing normal attacks or if Night Soul points are consumed, which is a superior way to gain them. I will actually take this into account for team rankings because it's very important for Mavuika to achieve as much fighting spirit as possible, since the more she has it when the burst is cast, the more initial damage it will deal, plus it will also improve her bike attacks. So kinda like Raiden Shogun who relied on other units to spend their energy, Mavuika really wants other Natlin units to spend a lot of Night Soul points. In fact, without 100 points, she can't even cast the burst. Alright, so let's first talk about Mavuika as a main DPS, then I'll also cover some of her best teams when she is off-field. And starting from the top, her best meta team is going to be Benny, Xilonen, and Citlali. This allows her to achieve a true 100% of her potential, and this will be used as a baseline for other teams. Obviously, the biggest pain point with this team comp is that it's super premium. You had to get Xilonen from older update, and now you also have to pull for Citlali. But if we take a look at this showcase, Xilonen is on Instructor set, Benny is using Noblesse as usual, and then Citlali is actually equipped with Cinder City and Thrilling Tales Catalyst. Now we can see with the signature weapon, she can melt for a whopping 929,000 damage, and then will further melt 2 times for 259 and 220k damage. But there's also another way to score more melts. When the 4th donut is over, quickly dash to give a bit of time for Citlali to reapply cryo, and you can then squeeze in 2 extra melts, but sometimes you can also get 1 last melt by plunging. It really depends. Also, if you're outside of Natlin, it's kinda not possible to achieve the 3rd melt since Mavuika runs out of her Night Soul points, and you need to cast the skill after dashing from 4th donut. But this takes a lot of time and practice to get the hang of it, so don't worry too much about it. Now also, with this team, if using something like Mailed Flower, she can still hit for insane amounts of damage. The burst's initial hit can land for 748k damage, and then she still proceeds to melt for around 200k damage with each donut. Thing is though, if you want that burst to initially hit for a bigger number, you want to activate Mavuika's skill during the setup rotation. But this can often lead to messing up Cryo Aura for Citlali, and you won't even score any melts. So I just usually ignore using Mavuika's skill when setting up the rotation to avoid this happening because it happened way too many times to me. Okay, so what if you don't have Xilonen and use someone like Sucrose instead? Well, ironically, she actually helps me reach the 1 million burst hit because Sucrose can provide a lot of EM from just triggering a single swirl, and she's really just using a VV set. But thing is, while in Abyss, the first rotation will look nice because Mavuika starts with maximum fighting spirit, but you will clearly see the dip in damage on second rotation, since without Xilonen, you're missing out on about 90 fighting spirit that she can immediately supply with her skill, which is pretty huge. So technically, on first rotation, this team is better than the best meta team, but it suffers after the first rotation. Now, what if we don't want to use Benny Boy? Well, surprisingly, it's not that bad. If you go with an animal unit like Kazuha or Sucrose, the damage drop-off is about 10% or so. So just keep in mind, if I'm running Benny, usually Mavuika is using Elemental Sands, but without Benny, I'd go for Attack Sands, just because she will be missing out on a big chunk of attack boosting from Benny. Moving over, there's also Furina Team Comp. This is a team you'd use if you don't or can't pull for Citlali. Honestly, the damage does drop off a bit. It can range quite a lot, especially since Pyro causing Melts has a 2x multiplier, while Pyro causing Vapes has 1.5x multiplier. But on top of that, setting up healing can be finicky, which is needed to maximize Furina's damage boosting. However, she does make up for it with pretty good raw damage from Hydro attacks. Still, I'd say this team is below any team comp that utilizes both Xilonen and Citlali, because honestly, Citlali is like providing extra 25 to 30% damage to Mavuika compared to Furina, and my Furina is already C1 when I was testing things out. But going back to a team core without Xilonen, but you pulled for Citlali, well, there's plenty of interesting team comps you can go for, like going double cryo with Rosaria. But the problem is that without Xilonen, sometimes on the next rotation, Mavuika's fighting spirit will not be as high compared to when you have Xilonen in the team. On the other hand, what if there's a team with Xilonen but Citlali and Furina are missing in action? Well, you can go for a variety of cryo and hydro applicators, although we will definitely feel a chunky loss in damage if you use Xingqiu or Yalan, since they will then force Mavuika to use normal bike attacks instead of the charge attack donuts, which vape for far less damage. So keep in mind, if there's a cryo or hydro unit that can especially hold Thrilling Tales and apply enough of their element, this could help boost Mavuika's overall performance pretty well, but obviously still not as great as with Citlali. Still, I would group these teams where you have either Xilonen or Citlali as the best ones. There's a ton of variations I haven't mentioned, but basically, these teams, especially with both of them included, will deliver absolutely crazy numbers, no matter if you're using a signature weapon or any budget 4-star or 5-star stat stick. Still, what about teams without Xilonen and Citlali? Well, the thing is, on first rotation, Mavuika with full fighting spirit, even without causing any reactions, can still deliver a ton of damage. Like seriously, it's pretty bonkers. However, that is for the first rotation. Moving onwards to second rotation, she won't have as much fighting spirit. But on top of that, if we look at a team like Rosaria, Benny, and Kachina, I mean, Kachina's Night Soul consumption is so abysmally bad. It's not even funny. Seriously, it takes about 21 seconds for Kachina to recharge over 100 fighting spirit from Mavuika, which is the minimal amount. And again, as I said, for first rotation, this doesn't matter because she has max burst ready, but it's pretty painful to charge it up with Kachina if you don't do some stuff like actually using Mavuika's skill to quickly consume some points and speed up the burst charging. I mean, inside the Abyss, you could do something for each chamber, like killing all mobs in one rotation, then reset the progress and achieve 3-star rating on second and third chambers by doing resets over and over, but I don't think most of you will want to do this. It's possible, but time consuming. So looking at the team so far, any team with both Xilonen and Citlali is automatically in highest tier. Then any team with either one of them will be the next best in line, and then anything without them is, to be honest, still very good, but again, the problem with not having enough fighting spirit on future rotations will feel impactful to some. And to be honest, Mavuika absolutely thrives in amplifying reaction teams, or in other words, when she's causing melts or vapes, especially melts, because her multipliers are just ridiculous. So automatically, you will feel a downgrade if you're not playing her in those types of teams. Again, that doesn't mean she's unviable, but the difference in power is vast. Oh, and what about Mavuika in a team without any Natlan unit? Let's just say it's even a tier below 4-star Natlan supports. Like, again, first rotation with max burst, it's fine, but then onwards, it's gonna be pure pain. Like, it'll take a while for her to even build up half of the burst, since during those 7 seconds after casting the burst, she isn't actually consuming Night Soul points, so they don't count towards her burst energy while the burst lasts. And only after those 7 seconds, she can start consuming the points, so keep that in mind. Now, as for the weapons, I'll be honest, the signature offers a pretty significant boost in damage, although some weapons like Serpent Spine, if you have a shielder to help protect the stacks, or Beacon of Reed Sea, they are only behind like 10% damage. So just aim for crit damage, attack percent, and EM stats, but some options like Mailed Flower, which I've mentioned, it's pretty good, behind like 20% in damage. but there are some finicky rotations that might drive you mad if you mess up Cryo and Hydra application. Otherwise, I found Tidal Shadow to be a very easy to use weapon with Furina or Xilonen teams, or basically any team with a healer, and then some other 5-star stat sticks like the Unforged, Verdict, and Fang of the Mountain King. They're nice, but still behind the signature a bit. Still, if you care about maximizing her on-field performance, I'd highly recommend Citlali over Mavuika's signature because she's just a super powerful support for Mavuika. And overall, I would say while you can deal super nice numbers even without Xilonen or Citlali, like for example when using Auroran or Kachina, the difference in power is pretty vast, not gonna lie. But you have to ask yourself, do you have any content that requires that much damage from Mavuika that you would care about? Because you can still hit for over 500,000 damage with just a 4-star Natlan support, and then melt or vape for 100 to 200k damage with the donuts. It's just that the future rotations will require a bit more on-field time with Mavuika to build up her burst. Although I would say without any Natlan units, it's gonna feel a bit scuffed to play her. Not unplayable, but not efficient either. But yeah, since I've mentioned Mavuika is kinda lukewarm as the only Natlan unit when she's on field, what about her performance as off-field unit? You've probably already heard this, so I will just reiterate the same thing. Mavuika's Pyro application when used as off-field support is pretty good, but not as good as Xiangling's. On the other hand, Xiangling needs her burst to apply Pyro, while with Mavuika, you just tap the skill and enjoy the Pyro application. On top of that, if you run her with the scroll set, she will also boost the damage for both herself and the main DPS unit, or maybe even more units depending on team comps and reactions she causes. But also, depending on how much fighting spirit she had, her second passive will also boost the active unit's damage after casting the burst, which by the way can still deliver pretty sizable number. So yeah, as an off-field Pyro support, she's great, and can work great for teammates like Mullani, who ironically will deal as much damage as Mavuika's burst, but obviously will beat that damage with more chomps she makes, but it is kind of funny. And then there's also Neuvillette, who, believe it or not, at C0 will find her as a nice support, and some of his attacks will vape on top of that. Although for someone like Kinich, like I said in my previous video, due to the way scroll set works, which requires you to trigger a reaction, this buff will run out because applying Pyro on burning target doesn't count, unfortunately. So only the first buff duration will count. And then there's also Chaska, whom I really enjoyed using these past few weeks, and she's also great here. However, one thing I will mention, quite often you will notice Mavuika is still running as a support alongside Xilonen or Citlali. Well, that's because they are kind of universal supports, and because they also help build Mavuika's burst, ironically, they also become most valuable teammates to her when using her for off-field teams. Since if you just use her by herself, she will generate around 80 to 90 points, which is not enough to trigger her burst next time, since you need at least 100. So hopefully the DPS unit she's boosting is a normal attacker, since that would help fill up the rest of her burst. Otherwise, you then gotta use another Natlan unit to help iron out this issue. But I mean, if you're okay with just using the burst every other rotation, then sure, she will perform less efficiently as off-field support, but it's possible. Also, it's funny how she doesn't need energy, yet still generates 5 pyro particles, which is great for someone like Benny or Xiangling to catch them. Finally, instead of being the one who does the melting, Mavuika can provide enough pyro application for cryo units like Ganyu or Wriothesley, which is pretty nice. So, what do I think about Mavuika so far? Well, I actually didn't talk about quite a few more of her teams, like Mono Pyro with Xilonen or Kazuha, as well as Double Pyro Geo team with Navia. But overall, I would say there's a very clear hierarchy in team comp superiority, since even though she can deal a ton of damage, Xilonen and Citlali offers significant upgrades for Mavuika, to the point that the difference in power is just crazy to me. And as I said, she absolutely thrives in melt or vape teams, but can also be very good in other teams, such as Chevre's Overload or Mono Pyro. However, I would really like to see a future Natlan 4-star support who can quickly consume their Night Soul points, because Kachina's speed is very slow, while Auroran is kinda better, but I just wish it wasn't only the 5-stars, which are Xilonen and Citlali, that can do this. Still, would I recommend to pull from Mavuika if you don't have Xilonen or Citlali? It depends. Do you need an on-field pyro damage dealer, since we do have so many of them? And also, are you fine with the fact that even though Mavuika will deal a lot of damage even without these 2 units, but the difference in power will be big when compared to them? I mean, as long as you understand that, I think you can make the choice for yourself. Plus, I didn't really talk about this since other content creators talked about it, but her exploration is pretty cool since the bike can do everything in Natlan, although its exploration capabilities are pretty neutered outside Natlan, but can be still usable for short distances. And I did forget to mention this, but she is a pretty capable, although slightly slow Pyro applicator. But she does bring quite a lot of value, even when you utilize her for the so-called off-field support, even though she can still delete enemies with her burst. Overall, I think Mavuika has some pretty crazy power, with or without those premium supports I kept talking about. But I just wish we also had a good 4-star who can quickly consume Night Soul points as well. More importantly, that 4-star would also have to be a good enough Hydro or Cryo applicator to enable Vapes or Melts from Mavuika, but that's probably wishful thinking for now. On top of that, it's also pretty crazy both Citlali and Mavuika are in the same phase. And I think we can all agree it would have been better if Citlali was in phase 2, so you can save up more Primo Gems. But anyway, hope you found this video useful. I haven't slept for 24 hours by now, and I still got Citlali and Pyro Traveler videos to make, so they are coming very soon, but I'd appreciate if you could press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and see you next time.